Well, hello there, class. It's been a while since we got together. I hope everybody is doing well. As you know, we are all online now, so I'm trying something a little bit new here. I'm in my garage at home, and I'm going to try to put some videos together for us so we can kind of stay connected a little bit and hopefully learn a few things. Today we're going to cover chapter 17. It's on batteries, battery operation, how batteries are constructed, a little bit about how they work, and then we'll make a couple of other videos for testing and service. Okay. So before we do that, though, I just hope say everybody's doing okay. I'm going to try to run this kind of like a regular class, in the sense that this video will be unedited and will be raw, because I haven't learned how to edit videos yet. Okay, so we're just going to see how this goes, see how long this takes, and hopefully it'll work out okay. So hopefully you've logged into to Moodle, and you have located some of the documents that I have loaded for you there. One of them being battery basics. So hopefully you have found this document right here that looks like this, and it says battery basics. So I'm going to be using that kind of as my outline today, and I'm also going to be with the textbook here. Also have our textbook here with us too. So let's go ahead and get started and see how this goes. What do you say? So chapter 17, page 236 in your book, and page 1 on your battery basics PDF handout. Okay? So the automotive battery says is a lead acid storage battery that is an electrochemical device that produces voltage and delivers electrical current. Okay, so we've already talked about voltage and current, right? So the battery is the heart, really, of the electrical system. As I've told you guys before about voltage, right? All the voltage comes from the battery originally. It may be distributed to different places in the car, different modules, and modules distribute it out, ignition switch distributes it out, fuses distribute out the power, but it all comes from the battery. So without the battery, without the voltage, nothing happens. Okay? Remember, voltage is king. Voltage is the deal. That's what we got to have for everything to work, electrically speaking, and to make the car run, obviously, too. So the battery stores electrical energy. Okay? It's a chemical reaction that takes place that creates the voltage and creates the pressure, okay, that we call voltage. It also pushes that voltage through the circuit, or the voltage pushes the electrons through the circuit. We call that current. Okay? We measure current in amps, you remember. So amps is the number of electrons flowing through the circuit, where voltage is the power that's pushing it through. Okay? So in an automotive situation, most all batteries are lead acid. We're going to describe that a little bit more as we go. Okay? So page 2 says the purpose of the battery, or as I put on the board here, functions. Okay? The function of the battery. What is the purpose? What is its function? And so they list 3 on this handout here. I've added one because it's very important. Okay? And I've worded it a little bit different than what's on the sheet there. But 4 basic primary functions of a battery include, number 1, power when the key is off. Now that might sound a little odd, a little funny to you, but you got to have power all the time. Okay? Otherwise the car's not going to start. Otherwise, when you come up to the car and hit your key fob, right, to unlock the doors, turn off the alarm, etc., you've got to have power for that to happen. So there has to be power all the time, even when the key is in the off position. May or may not have thought about it like that, but but it's true. Okay? Number two, obviously, we need power, we need voltage and amperage when we're cranking the engine or when we're starting the engine. We have to have power for fuel pump, obviously. But first of all, we have to have power too for the starter motor, right? The starter motor is one of the highest amp devices on the car, and you know, they run 100 to 150 amps, okay, to turn the engine over. We've looked at that a little bit in class already, if you remember. But it has to have enough power, enough voltage, enough amperage reserve in the battery. We'll talk about reserve and all that kind of stuff here in a little bit, and the capacity of the battery. But it has to have enough ability to crank the engine. And it has to have enough ability to crank the engine when it's hot like today. I've picked the hottest day of the year so far to make this video, so you may see a shiny forehead here occasionally. I've got a paper towel here. So, like I say, we're going to be getting a little bit informal here to sense and uncut here. All right, no fancy video tricks here. We're just going to be talking about batteries. Okay. So, power when starting when it's hot. Power when starting when it's 0 degrees outside. Okay. Since a battery is a chemical reaction, it's sensitive to temperature, and its ability to create voltage and amperage is relative to the temperature of the battery. Okay, that may be one reason why they put some of the batteries inside the cars now. Okay, a little bit more stable environment than underneath the hood. Under hood temperatures get pretty hot, especially on a hot day, and so there's a couple reasons why they put them inside the car, but one of them has to do with the environment that it's in mainly. Okay. So we've got power when the key's off or the engine's off, power cranking the engine. Then obviously we have third function of the battery is to power when the engine is running, and that's obvious also too. We have to have continuous electrical power to run all of our accessories. Everything that's on the car that's electrical has to have voltage, has to have current, and so the battery again is the source of all of that. Okay? Now I want you to remember that because we're going to talk about charging systems later, and charging systems play an important role in this, but the battery is where all this comes from. The battery is the source of this. The battery maintains this, well, keeps it where it needs to be, and supplies all of the voltage for, again, like the fuel pump, the ignition system, your air conditioner, which I had one in here today, okay, headlights, radio, sunroof, whatever you've got, electric, heated seats, you know, all those things that we enjoy that are electrical in the car. The battery is the source of all that power. And again, though, it's distributed out through the car various ways and to make everything work. It's a pretty cool deal, really, the way that works. And fourthly, very interestingly, the fourth one, which is not in your notes or in this handout here, the fourth deal is that it acts as a power stabilizer. Okay? It acts as a stabilizer, and that is all the time. Okay? All the time. Not running, cold, hot, etc. Cranking. The battery, by design, functions as a power stabilizer. So what does that mean? Okay? So that means that when there are power surges, when there's the alternators charging, or when the starter's cranking and that voltage fluctuates or that current draw is more or less, the battery acts as a cushion, if you will, as a voltage cushion. Okay, it cushions that. It keeps that from happening just instantaneously. Okay, so when there's a high load like 150 amps cranking, it absorbs some of that load in a sense and keeps that from happening all the way. It does that to protect itself, one thing, but it also does that just so that there's a smooth operation all the time and delivery of voltage and current to the car. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And that's a very critical function of the battery that's often overlooked, and is very critical today because the more low voltage circuits that we have on the car, i.e. modules that run on 5 volts or 8 volts and low current, the more sensitive those modules are to voltage fluctuations. Okay? And I know for a fact that most all modules will set codes for voltage fluctuations. You know, a high voltage, higher than expected, or a lower voltage. Particularly a lower voltage is a B1325, and will set in almost every module because of low voltage. And sometimes that low voltage only happens for a millisecond, and those modules can catch it. Okay? So the battery's job, one of its main jobs, functions, is to act as a stabilizer for the voltage system as a whole. So I hope that makes sense. And I've seen many problems on cars because of that fluctuation. Matter of fact, while I'm thinking about it, I'll go ahead and share one with you. Let me get a little drink of water here. I've seen this more than one time where like the dash lights and the headlights on the car will have this little glowing, flickering type condition where you can see it, particularly at night. But if you pull up like into the garage here and the lights shine on the wall and you just sit there, you can see voltage, or see the headlights kind of glowing like this. I had one in particular one time. I remember it was a GMC Envoy, and it was very noticeable. And when it came to me, it had already been to a couple of different places, and they'd already replaced the alternator, because most people think the alternator is doing that because of the charging fluctuations and things like that. And that's not a bad idea there. But they'd already put the alternator on it, but of course it had an aftermarket alternator when I got it. So yeah, I went ahead and put a General Motors alternator on it just to make sure that it was okay. Still did it. Did a couple of other things with the regulator to try to take the regulator out of the system, and still did it, and still did it. Well, on an Envoy, they have a plastic cover over the top of the battery. It covers the whole battery. You can't see the battery at all. And so I didn't think about it for a while. It took me a little while to figure it out. But I finally took that cover off the battery, and it had an aftermarket battery in it. I don't know what brand it was, but it didn't have to be aftermarket. It could have been a Delco battery, you know. But I do remember it's an aftermarket battery, and I had seen that before. So sure enough, I put a new battery in the car. All that flickering and pulsing and variations all went away. Smooth as could be. So I know for a fact that the battery acts as a power stabilizer all the time. Okay? So key thing there, might help you out someday when you're diagnosing a car doing that. Okay? All right. Let's move on then. Let's see here. Batteries. Wet and dry charge. So batteries can be produced as a wet charge, such as automotive batteries are today, or they can be a dry charge, such as a motorcycle battery, and so forth. So batteries in the cars today are wet. In other words, they have a liquid inside of them, sulfuric acid. Okay. Lead acid battery is filled with electrolyte and charged when it is built. During storage, a slow chemical reaction will cause a self-discharge, and periodic charging is required. Most batteries today are wet charged. There again, I shed a little light on that too. Batteries that sit on the shelf for a long time may need to be charged prior to or when you install it into a vehicle. I've had a particular case in that situation too with a daycare. Daycare had a van that they didn't use very often, and it came in several times complaining about the battery going dead. Right? Put a new battery in it. It'd be gone for 6 months, and then it'd come back and said the battery's dead. They only had 30 miles put on it. Okay, they only driven it 30 miles or something like that, you know, in 6 months. Okay, the battery would charge up and it would test good, but or it might test bad. It's happened a couple of times. All right. So finally, I realized, remember this again too. So I got the battery, a new battery for it, hooked it on our special charger that we had that tested batteries and charged them and all that stuff. And that brand new battery took an hour and a half of charging before it came up to specs. Okay? So I think what was happening, even though I was putting a new battery in it, that battery was not fully charged. And they drove it 10 miles back to the daycare and parked it, right? And it wasn't really fully charged, even though it said 12 volts, right? They parked it, didn't drive it, or maybe they just drove it a couple of little short distances, and then the battery's dead in 6 months, right? So after I put that new battery in there and I took the time to charge it for an hour and a half and test it again, we didn't have any more trouble with that particular van. So there are cases like that where that makes a difference. Okay, another tip there that might be important. All right, battery construction next on page 3 here. We're still on, and it's on page 236 in your book. An automobile battery contains a diluted sulfuric acid electrolyte in positive and negative electrodes, okay, in the form of several plates. These are made into plates, and there's a pretty good little picture there of what those look like. Since the plates are made of lead and/or lead derivative materials, this type of battery is often called then that lead acid battery. The battery is separated into cells, and in the case of automobile batteries, there's 6 cells, okay? And each cell has several battery elements, all bathed in an electrolyte solution. Okay, so we have positive and negative plates in an electrolyte solution. Okay, so let me look here. It says how batteries work on page 239. It says the principle on which the battery works is based on the scientific principle discovered years ago, which states when two dissimilar metals are placed in an acid, electrons flow between the plates or the metals if a circuit is connected between them. Okay, so it's just a very simple principle. We have two dissimilar metals. The negative plate has one type of lead on it with some other chemicals, and the negative plate has another type. And they're talked about in the book here and given details of what those are. And so we have two dissimilar metals in an electrolyte, and that produces this, through a chemical reaction, it produces voltage and electron flow. Okay, so very simple in that respect. Like everything in the automobile business, it gets a little more complicated, a little more technical sometimes, but that's the basic idea. Okay, so let's move on to page 4 in our handout here. It says cell operation. The two dissimilar metals placed in an acid bath produce electrical potential, it's a good word, across the poles. The cell produces voltage by a chemical reaction when the plates, between the plates and the electrolyte. The positive plate is made of a reddish-brown material such as lead dioxide, PbO2, while the negative plate is a grayish material called sponge lead, or just Pb. The acid bath is a mixture of sulfuric acid and water cell electrolyte. Together a cell element is formed there, and they have a nice little picture of what that looks like. If you don't have a copy of this, we've got two different plates there dipped into a solution. Okay? All right, so let's move on a little bit more on that. The next page describes a little bit more about what's happening there. Okay? So we have a picture here of charging and discharging and what happens. So let's look at that. Okay? The battery stores electricity. Okay? Stores it. Doesn't necessarily create it in a sense. It stores it. All right? And delivers that voltage, electricity as we need it, in the form of chemical energy. That's why we call it a potential energy. Chemical energy is potential. It's there, it's ready to go when we ask for it. Okay? We hit that key and we want to start it and go. Through a chemical reaction process, the battery creates and releases electricity as needed by the electrical system or devices. Now, you could just run past that sentence and not really catch what he said there. It releases this energy as needed. Okay? That's a very interesting thing about the behavior of electricity, in that it only delivers the amount of amperage that it's asked for, or that it needs. Okay? When we look at charging systems next week, we'll see that. Okay? When we turn on different loads on the car, the amperage, the alternator output goes up because the battery needs more help maintaining that. Okay? So it's as needed. It is able to sense that load. There's one of my favorite words again. It's directly related to the load that's placed on the battery, is how much it delivers. Okay? So, battery creates and releases electricity as needed by by the system or devices, it says there. Since the battery loses its chemical energy in this process, particularly when it's cranking as such and the alternator is not charging, it must be recharged by the alternator. By reversing electrical current flow through the battery, the process is reversed, thus charging the battery. The cycle of discharging and charging is repeated continuously, almost constantly when the car is running, and is called battery cycling. Okay, battery cycling. And they give you a picture of that here again with the discharge and then the charging, and it shows the arrows and shows it flowing back and forth. And that's a fairly good representation of what's happening there. Let me get another drink here. You guys still with me? All right. Okay, I was just looking at something here real quick. Okay, sorry. So on this discharging thing, let's explain that a little bit differently. I believe that is it's in your book on page 239. Okay, it says on the during discharging, the acid is leaving the electrolyte. Okay, and is getting onto both of the plates, it says, or is being absorbed by the plates. So when it's discharging, the acid solution or the electrolyte is moving into the plates. Okay, during charging, the acid is being forced from the plates back into the electrolyte. Okay, so the picture that they have here is they're trying to represent that in the picture here, and it says the current changes direction. Well, really what changes directions there is this flow back and forth of the electrolyte on the plates. Okay, as the battery's working, we're still going positive to negative through the system. Okay, don't let that confuse you there. All right. Okay. Take a minute to think about that. Again, that discussion is on page 239 in a little green box there. Okay. All right. So deep cycling. Automotive batteries are not designed to be deep cycle batteries. Automotive batteries are designed to be maintained all the time. Okay, at the top at 12.6 volts. They're designed to be not discharged all the way down and back up. Now they can do that a couple of times, and if something happens to the battery, something's left on and the battery goes dead, it can be charged back up and it can recover from that. But that's like a one-time thing, or something happens very occasionally. But they make batteries that are deep cycle batteries that are made to be discharged all the way down because there's no alternator in the system, and then charged back up with a charger, like a trolling motor battery or something like that. Automotive batteries are not like that, okay? And so you don't want to get a deep cycle battery for your car. It won't help you in any. That's not how it's designed to work, okay? All right, so moving on. Cell voltage. Page 6 on our handout. We've already talked about cells a little bit. Each cell element of the battery produces approximately 2.1 volts, regardless of the size or the quantity or the size of the plates. Automotive batteries have 6 cells that are connected in series. okay, which produced in a total of 12.6 volts. Excuse me. Okay, so we have 6 cells that are hooked up in series. We've talked about how things are in series and parallel and so forth, right? So if you put, there's a picture there, pretty good picture, 2.1 volts per cell, okay? You put them in series with each other and it just adds it up. So a fully charged lead acid automobile battery is 12.6 volts, technically, okay? And we like to be technical sometimes, right? Okay? And so, as we'll see a little later on, there's a reason we do that too. There's ways of telling the state of charge of the battery if it's not at 12.6, and they have charts for that too. Okay? So, the size of the battery is irrelevant here in a sense, as far as the 12.6 volts. Matter of fact, you can have a dry cell battery this big as 12 volts, but you can bet it won't start a car. Okay? But it's going back to lead acid batteries. If we have a lead acid battery that's this big, it may start the car, or we could have one that's this big. So it's the size of the battery doesn't determine the voltage. It doesn't determine the voltage, then what does it determine? Okay? Well, it determines the capacity of the battery. So the larger the physical size of the battery, the more plates there are in each cell. The larger the plates are in each cell, the better constructed they are, okay, the better materials that are used, then the more capacity it has, all right? And we're going to look at ratings here in a little bit too. So it's not necessarily the size that determines the voltage, it's the number of cells that determines the voltage, and they're each 2.1 volts, okay? Very good. Glad you guys are staying with me here. All right, page 7, battery cell element. It says the key to battery operation then is the cell element. The positive plates and negative plates are connected together by separate plate straps. These groups of positive and negative plates are then placed alternately, okay, separated by micro-porous separators. Assembled together, the plates and separators form a battery cell element. Grouping of the plates in this way serves to enlarge the surface area, okay, between the active materials and the electrolyte, thus allowing a greater amount of electricity to be supplied, created. In other words, the battery capacity is increased because of increased surface area. There again. The more surface area, the more plates we have, the more capacity that we have. More surface plates means more the battery can deliver, means the surface area means the battery can deliver also more current. So they got a nice little picture there of how those are stacked together, and it got them kind of pulled apart so you can see how they then slide back together, and works pretty good that way. Okay? Not a complicated design, but works good. All right. A little bit more about construction. The battery plates are constructed of a lead alloy, containing a percentage of either antimony or calcium. Okay, the plates are designed as a thin, flat grid, and grids crossing at right angles, shown in the picture there, or grids crossing diagonally in different angles, which reduces internal resistance. So they can be made a couple different ways. The grid provides the necessary framework for the active material to be pasted onto the plates, making either positive or negative plates. The active plate material on the charged plates, again, is that reddish-brown lead dioxide, while the active material on the negative plates is the grayish sponge lead. Okay, there's a good picture of that. All right. A little bit about Bell